I was laying in bed, probably not the best thing to do to listen to various podcasts just before you go to sleep because, let's face it, there's not a lot of happy news. And I was listening to Democracy Now!, a news source that I don't necessarily endorse because it's gone off the rails with a few issues, but it's got some very good daily headlines. I was just watching the various news items in relation to Trump and his kind of moving closer to a sort of an authoritarian ruler and like a neo-fascist kind of thing.
Amy, I wanted to talk about something else, which I think is very important. We're seeing a lot of it now, which is these protests around the country of people demanding an end to the shutdowns that were aimed to stop the spread of the pandemic. And what troubles me most about this is how right-wing extremists are brandishing automatic weapons, and they become regular features of these protests. And with the man in the White House saying nothing to condemn this form of intimidation. Obviously, most of them are Trump supporters. And I'd like our viewers and listeners to ask themselves a question. If hundreds of African Americans or Latinos showed up in cities around the country brandishing automatic weapons, what would be the response of the country to this? Why is this being almost accepted and normalized now as a method of protest? And my fear is that this will become normalized over the next few months as we head toward a bitter national election. And we should make no mistake that this country is edging closer and closer to neo-fascist authoritarianism.
And Juan, you say the issue of it being almost accepted. It's not almost. The president from the bully pulpit of the White House is encouraging it, right? Saying these are his people, and he's saying liberate these states with these protests.
He's encouraging the protests. He hasn't directly, to my knowledge, encouraged the armed, the brandishing of weapons, but he's accepting it and praising these folks as wonderful Americans. And I don't think we should discount the possibility that if this president will declare an election that he loses as a fraud and illegitimate and attempt to stay in power. Some people may say this is far-fetched. I hope it is. But I think that we shouldn't delude ourselves that we are living in extraordinary times in the United States right now.
Well, this is typical behavior of autocrats and dictators. When you make colossal errors, which are killing thousands of people, find somebody else to blame. And in the United States, it's unfortunately the case for well over a century and a half, that it's always easy to blame the yellow peril. They're coming after us. We've seen this all through my life, in fact, way before. So blame the World Health Organization, blame China, claim that the World Health Organization has insidious relations with China, is practically working for them. And that sells to a population that's been deeply indoctrinated for a long time, way back to the Chinese Exclusion Acts in the 19th century, to say, yeah, those yellow barbarians are coming over to destroy us. That's almost instinctive. And it's backed up by the echo chamber. So, say Rush Limbaugh, science is one of the four corners of deceit, along with media, academia, forget one of the others, but they're the four corners of deceit. They live on deceit. You keep driving that into people's heads. They say, why should we believe anything? Why should we believe the news? It's just fake news. They're all trying to destroy our savior, our president, the greatest president ever. I'm old enough to remember as a child listening to Hitler's speeches over the radio, Nuremberg rallies. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone and the reaction of the crowd, the adoring crowd, was very clear, very frightening. We know what it led to. It's hard to, it comes to mind at once when you listen to Trump's ravings in the crowd. Now, I don't suggest that he's anything like Hitler. Hitler had an ideology, horrible ideology, not only massacring all the Jews and 30 million Slavs and the Roma and conquering much of the world, but also an internal ideology. The state, under the control of the Nazi Party, should control every aspect of life, should even control the business community. That's not the world we're in. In fact, it's almost the opposite. Business controlling the government. And as far as Trump is concerned, the only detectable ideology is pure narcissism. Me, that's the ideology. As long as I am smart enough to keep serving the real masters, pour money into the pockets of the very wealthy in the corporate sector, and they'll let you get away with your antics. As I said, even in the February 10th budget, while cutting back on protection against diseases in the midst of a raging pandemic, increases funding for fossil fuel production, which is going to destroy us all. Of course, a lot more money for the Pentagon and for his famous wall. That's the world we're living in. Here, not everywhere, what President Trump is leading, with the support of the Murdoch echo chamber, Fox News, and others. And amazingly, this conjuring act is working. So with one hand, you raise your hand to heaven. I'm the chosen one. I'm your savior. I'm going to rebuild America, make it great again for you, because I'm the servant. I'm the loyal servant of the working class, and so on. Meanwhile, with the other hand, you're stabbing them all in the back. To carry this off is an act of political genius. You have to recognize that serious talent is involved, whether intuitive or conscious planning. It's devastating. We've seen it before. We see it now in dictators, of autocrats, sociopaths who happen to get into leadership positions. And it's now happening in the richest, most important country in world history.
For a while now, I've been sort of wondering about that, but now I actually think that that's actually quite a possibility. That when he gets in again, which he will get in, because let's face it, the Democrats aren't serious about winning. Otherwise, they would have not been choosing somebody who's in cognitive decline and is really just a poor version of Trump in a way. So that means that, you know, they don't care if Trump gets in or not, and I believe that. I really don't think they care as long as they're as long as they're lining their pockets while he's in office. They don't care if he's in or he's not, or if they're in or they're not in. So, you know, things like Trump kind of encouraging sort of some of the more right-wing nutty types to sort of, you know, this liberating various states from shutdown and things like that, and the people that have guns, you know, I wonder, you know, what's going to happen if he doesn't win the election, which is unlikely, but if he did not win the election, or they manage to fudge it so that he didn't win, maybe the national security state doesn't like how uncontrollable he is, even though he's doing their bidding most of the time, but he's sort of unpredictable, and maybe they help, you know, fudge the federal election. Who knows? But say he didn't get in for some miracle. You know, he may actually encourage, you know, his right-wing, you know, base to sort of get their guns and, you know, start shooting up places and stuff. Who knows? But I really think if he gets in, which he will, he's going to just see that as a mandate, and he's going to start doing some really, really crazy things. Really crazy things. And I'm going to play you something from Abby Martin that I thought was really good, what she said. And I think rather than explain what she said. I'll just play it to you, and it's about where we go from here. All the people that support Bernie Sanders but can't bring themselves to vote for a warmongering, sexual assault perpetrator, conservative Republican, which is really what Joe Biden is. If you can't bring yourself to vote for him, and why should you? Why on earth would anybody want to vote for that? Then there are other choices, and the Democrats aren't going to win with Joe Biden, so it doesn't matter. Anyway, if you vote for Gloria La Riva and Leonard Peltier, but it's better, like Eugene Debs said, better to vote for something that you want rather than something that you don't want. It's much better to do that. It's much better to get out of this ridiculous idea of the lesser evil and that's just what the Democrats want you to believe. But it's all evil. And the more you feed into it and the more you prop them up, every time they say, look at that candidate. They're always doing this. Look at that candidate. He's a horror story. You must vote for us. That's the best they can come up with. Well, that's ridiculous. And that'll just go on and on and on, because look what Hillary Clinton did during the 2016 election. We found out via the Podesta emails leaked by WikiLeaks that she was actually propping up Donald Trump, and with this Pied Piper strategy, it was called, to sort of get him more attention so that she would be able to beat him easily, because she thought she could beat Donald Trump easily. That was a huge mistake. So they tried to give him more attention so he would be the candidate she'd run against, and she thought she could beat him easily, and that's why her campaign was doing that. And of course the mainstream media admitted that they were propping Donald Trump up because he was a money spinner for them. Like CBS's Les Moonves, the disgraced Les Moonves said, Trump is bad for the country, but it's good for business. So anyway, they propped Donald Trump up thinking that Hillary Clinton could beat Donald Trump, and of course that was a huge mistake, and Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. But see how they keep trying to make everybody afraid of certain candidates, and that's the best they can come up with. We've got to beat Donald Trump. Even Bernie Sanders was putting out that thing, which is really, he was totally deflecting from the horror story that is the Democratic Party. He was not capable of critiquing the Democratic Party, and that's a horror story. Bernie Sanders just wouldn't do it, and that's why he wasn't serious about winning. Anyway, I'm moving away from this, but this whole lesser evil thing is just a nonsense, really, because they're both a horror story. I mean, Donald Trump, of course, yes, he is. He's very scary, very, very scary. But it's all lurching towards the same awfulness in the end. It's all lurching towards the Democratic Party. They just secure the corporations' hold on everything. And you end up in a dire situation as well, as if, it's just, the whole thing is a mess. So I'm going to play this thing from Abby Martin, so stick around, and thanks for watching.
All these holier-than-thou rich liberals and establishment Democrats who are lecturing and vote-shaming Bernie supporters, who will always inevitably blame the left for their loss no matter what, they're not going to replicate the voter turnout or volunteer base to actually get out the vote for Biden. They're not going to put in the effort that Bernie supporters did, yet they want burners to do that for them, to defeat Trump. Trump is going to win. He's already making videos about Joe Biden's dementia. He's already been tweeting hella good things about Bernie's loss, right? That Bernie would never dare to say things like this. He will absolutely crush Joe Biden in the general election. And I shudder to think what Trump is going to do with his second term. It could get very, very ugly. That should not define who you're going to vote for in November. Do not waste your vote on Joe Biden. Every time that you vote and give a blank check to the Democratic Party, they will abuse you. They will blame you, right? No matter what, they will never capitulate to any of your demands. And it's just giving a blank check to all of their right-wing policies. And it just continues to push the country more to the right every single election cycle. We need to put all of our energy instead of into electoral politics every 2 to 4 years, we need to put it into an Occupy-style agitation, throwing our bodies into the gears of the machine, nationwide general strikes, shutting down business as usual, supporting workers on the front lines, renters who are getting hit the hardest from the devastation that is coming economically. It is time to organize outside of the system now. In fact, it's never been more urgent to lead the millions of young people who reject the status quo to organize outside the two-party system, outside of electoral politics, into the streets to fight and mobilize for the policies we truly deserve. And that means resurrecting massive labor and anti-war struggles and socialist campaigns. COVID has completely exposed the failures of capitalism, and there's really no arguing that anymore. It is not sustainable. And that's why I'm proud to announce I'm going to vote for Gloria La Riva and Leonard Peltier, a political prisoner, Native American, who's running as her vice presidential candidate. I'm going to link on the timeline not only a guide that I'm talking about the general strike demands, but also a PSL, Party for Socialism and Liberation forum of socialist leaders just talking about where we go from here, where the Bernie movement can go and generate this kind of movement that we're talking about. It's very, very interesting, very enlightening. And I just want to urge people to not fall into a pit of despair, guilt, or being shamed into thinking that they need to capitulate into this two-party hell. We've been living long enough on the earth and politically engaged long enough where we know the trappings and the emotional blackmail that happens every election cycle, and I'm just not going to do it again, Robbie. I bought into the hope and optimism through the Bernie campaign for a lot of reasons, primarily because I really believe that Bernie was a good person because of his 40-year track record. And I also was really enthused by the millions of young people supporting him and getting in the streets and mobilizing that giant volunteer base that I literally have never seen before. It was a completely different thing than the Obama era. I think that we can really utilize that energy, shift that energy into something that's a large-scale agitation against the empire and really putting it into workers' rights. And that's what we need to see happen. That's the only hope there is left. I believe in revolution, not reform. There is no reforming this corrupt, broken system. It has to be a revolutionary movement that is taking these problems by the horns and making demands and not ceding to any of the establishment bullshit. And that's where we have to go from here. So I'm just hoping that emerging out of the horror of this global pandemic, something beautiful can happen. The lotus flower grows out of the mud. And that's all we can hope for. You know, we can hope for something that's really sparked and that we can never go back to sleep again, because I don't see how we can possibly accept the status quo after we emerge from this.